It is time for NewsX and Business World to go ahead and present the Bharat Atmanirbhar Mission, where we go ahead and invite entrepreneurs from various sectors to come about, talk about the Unlock India plan. And this time around, it is the special SME and MSME sector that is in focus. Joining me on the broadcast are a number of guests. First of all, Dr. Anurag Batra, who is the chairman and editor-in-chief of Business World. Welcome on the show, Anurag, and I'll also introduce the other guests who are joining us on the broadcast at this point of time. Sridhar Prasad, who is the internet business expert and independent consultant. Also joining me on the broadcast in just a short while will be Aarti Harbhajankar, who is the managing director and co-founder Primus Partners. Ramesh Kailasam, who is the CEO India Tech Org, joins me on the broadcast. So does Lloyd Matias, who is the leader telecom and tech business. Dhanendra Kumar, ex-IAS officer and ex-chairperson of Competition Commission of India, also is there on the broadcast with us. So Anurag, it's great to have you back on the show. It's always nice to have you every week bringing about these entrepreneurs and talking to them and getting insights. And this time around, the specific issue that you are going to head and tackle is the MSME and the SMEs. Yes, the MSME and the SME sector. So if you could shed some more light into all that has been developing, and obviously we have our experts who are going to be talking about and giving us more information on what the government has been doing, what they have been doing, especially during the lockdown period.
Thank you, Megha. Let me bring in Mr. Dhanendra Kumar. Mr. Dhanendra Kumar is a former chairman of the Competition Commission of India. He's a bureaucrat. He's still very active. Let me ask you, Mr. Dhanendra Kumar, that in the last 6+ months, e-commerce has grown, and on the back of e-commerce, SMEs have grown. So tell us, over the next 12 months, 18 months, what will the government do to accelerate this growth? And does it need to bring in change in taxation, in rules, in governance? Give us a viewpoint. And I'm sure from you we'll get a nuanced viewpoint.
Thank you, Anuragji. First of all, my apologies for a slight interruption in between. The electricity was playing truant and there was no Wi-Fi for a brief while. Anyway, as far as the role of e-commerce in the pandemic before and after is concerned, I think pandemic has brought to the fore the prominent role of e-commerce, online, all transactions. In fact, technology has been the savior. Under the lockdown, when people were not able to move out for getting their stuff, their services, their provisions, their goods, everything, online services was the only medium which came to the rescue of the people. Initially, there were a lot of restrictions because delivery could be organized. Gradually, things fell into place. And now, in most places, the services through e-commerce have come back to the same level, pre-COVID level. Coming back to your question about the taxation and other problems which the e-commerce players, platforms, and the participants are playing, very good question. Actually, in February 2020, when the finance bill was presented, in that bill, there were two provisions which were inserted. One was 194O, the other was 206C1H. In the provision of 194O, it was stipulated that the e-commerce platforms, the operators, they would deduct 1% of the total, not the profit or anything, 1% of the total amount, the turnover, before paying it to the participant. So suppose I am selling this good on a particular platform, let's say Flipkart or whatever it is, then if I sell it for 60,000 rupees, then I have to deduct 1% of that, which includes the total of, let's say, includes GST and everything, all the taxation included. And this was the TDS. So this was 194O. In a way, it was tax on tax. And as you know, that most of the participants the traders who were participating through the platform, they operate on a very thin margin. In the competitive market, the margin is in single digits. So this 1% initially, it was causing a lot of problems during the pandemic, and the cash flow was very badly impacted. On top of this came this 206C1H, whereby it was stipulated that for all transactions, all this thing above 50 lakhs, they would be again, it was called TCS, tax collected at source, and this would be withheld at 0.1%. Now, the point is this, that the cash, on one hand, the government was trying to provide them relief. Let's say the 3 lakh crore, 3 trillion rupees was given out, supposed to be given out through the banking system. But in most cases, and particularly in the MSME sector, the micro, small, medium, the micro one particularly, many of them may not be benefiting from the banking sector, and they are operating on very thin margins, and they would be able to benefit from the 3 lakh crores, the relief which the government provided them. So if their cash flow was impacted right in the beginning in this manner, many of them were struggling to survive. So this pandemic brought to the fore the problems of this sector in a way that on one hand, the government was trying to provide them relief, keeping them afloat. On the other hand, some of these provisions which were made out before the pandemic brought out, this was announced in February. The request of the sector and the request of the chartered accountant, number of associations, the FICCI and all the traders, everyone, is that let this be not worked out on, this is applicable from 1st of October. So let the government not operate this provision or suspend it, operate it after a few years. Let this pandemic pass. This pandemic is going to stay for at least several months hence. It's not going to be over soon. And if we want the sector to survive, we have to give them relief. So let us suspend this for a couple of
essentially saying, let's, for time being, do away with this 1%
yes,
cess.
exactly.
I will not use it as a tax, it's a tax on a tax. So I explain the cess for at least 18 to 24 months, maybe
Right.
3 years,
Right.
and then we can revisit it, depending on how the economy is doing and how these players are doing and how their balance sheets are. Because they are, not only it's about they're surviving, they're also providing a very essential service. Whether we have to order food or to order essentials, the e-commerce players have not just been enterprises for business, they have been enterprises for social good in some way. Let me come to you. As you advise many companies in the startup space, including commerce, and with your long years of experience in the corporate sector, tell me, how do you think SMEs can be encouraged beyond what has been done in the last 6 months to be able to actually blossom? And there are lots of bottlenecks. Can you tell us, how can the government be a facilitator beyond what it has been to remove these bottlenecks?
Thanks, Anurag. Thank you for having me on the show. I think great point. I mean, just to take off from what Mr. Dhanendra Kumar said, I think you have to recognize that SMEs, and specifically the MSMEs, both the micro and the medium and small enterprises, they're really, in a sense, the backbone of the economy. Right? We're talking about 3.1 lakh MSEs, and of course the very fact that these provide a whole range of services. So I think at one level, not only does the government need to make help them proliferate, I think the other aspect is really making it much more easier for them to do business and actually encouraging the formation of more small and medium and micro enterprises. In that aspect, I think there are two parts. I think the first is to really make, when you talk of ease of doing business, a lot of the parameters are geared towards mid and large organizations. I think the starting point is really ensuring that there is this ground level of encouraging entrepreneurship, really getting a lot of young people straight out of education, teaching them life skills and getting them to start something they own. I think the best enterprise is when people start doing something by themselves, and in due course of time they grow so that they can add on other employees and really generate employment. The second aspect, I think, which is very critical, is besides making it easy to do business, is to actually provide them the necessary infrastructure. I think one of the big bottlenecks that comes in the growth of a lot of SMEs is really availability of proper infrastructure. So I think where the government can come in is really by providing the equivalent of, you can say, tax moratoriums. So instead of, adding on this 1% TDS as Mr. Kumar mentioned, I think it is very important that literally in the first years of operation and until they reach a certain level of turnover, to making interference and tax collection virtually zero, because the volume of employment they can generate and the contribution they can make to the economy in general will be far in excess of the amounts you would actually collect in tax, and in fact even the cost of tax collection. I think that's the first critical aspect to remember. The second point to remember is that courtesy the growth of a lot of the e-commerce players, which in turn has happened because of the growth of telecom. You're talking of 450 million kind of regular internet users, and out of which 350 million are actually regular or e-commerce. I think that has taken a lot of the pressure out of the infrastructure. Earlier it was a small enterprise actually had to have a salesperson who actually went out and camped for business. Now the process is seamless. The moment he gets enlisted in one of the platform, he has automatic availability to a few 100 million consumers without having to invest in himself. And therefore, I think in that sense, the e-commerce ecosystem provides a great avenue for the small and the micro enterprise. And therefore, any encouragement they get in that aspect will be positive, will be a value accretor to the economy, and will be generally beneficial to India's economy on the whole.
Thank you so much, Lloyd. You're right. Today's SMEs are tomorrow's big enterprises. Look at Flipkart in the last 8-9 years. I can give you the small specialized e-commerce players can be big and create employment, create tax for the government, and more importantly, serve the citizen of the country. Ramesh, let me ask you, we all talk about SMEs, but the biggest issue is access to credit, access to capital, because that's one thing that if we compare ourselves with our eastern neighbors, without naming them, or compare ourselves with Europe or America, the cost of capital for SMEs is very high. And over the last few weeks, in spite of the government, facilitating banks and encouraging banks to give more loans, the banks have been very conservative in lending to SMEs. So tell us, if the credit crunch for SME continues and the banks continue to be conservative like they are, how will SMEs grow?
Yeah, I'm glad, Anurag, you raised that question. If you look at the MSME space today, like Lloyd did mention, they are the backbones of the country. Today a large chunk, they employ roughly around 11 crore people in this country. That's a huge chunk, and they are contributing close to 50% of the export thing, and close to 30% of the GDP. So if you are looking at the contribution, it's phenomenal. The consumer of today and tomorrow is changing, as he rightly pointed out, thanks to access to the internet. More and more MSMEs are going digital for delivering. But if you look at access to capital, and I would like to answer this in two ways. One is, of course, access to capital in the banks. And the second part is the double whammy that's coming from 194O, which is actually sucking out your working capital. And I'll give an example on that front as we go along. But coming to your first point on access to capital, MSMEs and small businesses, if you look at the earlier access they have had, has been largely in the unorganized market, in the sense that they have actually tapped money outside the formal sources, primarily because the formal sources had their set of terms and conditions which prevented them from easy access to capital. But these are the ones which have been sincerely paying, even at high rates of interest, to the informal market that has been funding them. So their access to capital certainly is an issue. The banks and others have to work out mechanisms which can make their access to capital easier, but more importantly, practical. What I see missing is practicality in this whole scheme of things. Whatever terms and conditions that come in, are one-size-fits-all approach. MSMEs are in different sectors. Each of them have different cycles. Each of them have different timelines in the way the business rotates. And therefore, there is no customized format which is available. Apart from that, taxation is the double whammy for this. I would like to bring that again here for two reasons. I've been speaking to a large chunk of MSMEs and SMEs, and of course startups, which I represent in a large way. If you look at the startup ecosystem, both in the, and as I said, the customers of tomorrow are going digital. The moment today you land digital, 194.0 hits you hard. And I'm talking again, bringing 194.0 into the discussion because the kickoff date again is 1st October. Pandemic or not, 194.0 has a huge working capital disruptive capability. If you look at applicability of it, I might be just a small MSME who just started a travel business online. Not only am I supposed to deduct 1% of TDS on airline booking, which I'm not supposed to do under ITA regulations. If I was an online insurance intermediary, I'm supposed to deduct 1% on insurance premium, which I'm not supposed to do under 64(5)(b) of IRDA Act. There are a lot of practicalities which is going to hit me. So what will happen now to these MSMEs if I look at just the travel airline booking example or the insurance example, is that the airline would tell you, please pay the 1% on my behalf, and I will refund you back when it appears in my form 26 years or whatever that comes in. And therefore, I am telling a small MSME to hold that 1%. He's actually earning 2 to 3 or 4 or 5%. 1% of that gets logged as working capital, and I'm supposed to refund it back when I see it in my online system that you've actually created it. Now, this is something which is unnecessary to do because this sector is a sector having an audit trail. Same is the case with a lot of other sectors. Now, MSMEs who have decided to go digital are also going to pay the price because this is not a question about the big names that we often think about retail.
But regular MSME players who've been forced to go digital because of COVID.
Yes. I mean, not only forced to go because of...
There is an opportunity. There is an opportunity there.
Yeah, there is an opportunity there and they have decided to go digital. But the problem is that by going digital, I am now being penalized because I come under 1%. And I want to add one more segment here, which is the migrant labor and the workforce here. We are having huge amount of plumbers, we are having electricians, we are having salon operators who have gone online. They will now be forced to pay 1% TDS. So imagine the situation where you have a plumber and an electrician being forced to maintain a P&L account at the end of the year. And apart from that, he also has to file a chartered accountant, pay 2,000-3,000 rupees, get his P&L done, and file his what you call annual returns.
So you're clearly making a case for this to be revisited and possibly put into a cold freeze or an alternate mechanism which doesn't really put pressure on these MSMEs and these individuals who are just surviving, if I may say. So we'll come back to you, Ramesh, but let me bring in Sridhar. Sridhar, you heard Sri Dhanendra Kumar, you heard Lloyd, and you heard Ramesh make their comments very forcefully with data and with very logical thinking. What do you think is preventing the government from doing this? Government is wiser than us. It has the best set of advisors. It understands impact. Why do you think the government is not changing this?
So Anurag, thanks for this. And I heard all of the other speakers. I want to give the answer to your question in 2 dimensions. Dimension number 1 is the life of an MSME in the e-commerce ecosystem. I personally believe it's not clear yet. I mean, we may have experts like you and me advising the government, but the entire life cycle of an MSME in an e-commerce platform, I don't think has been listed down in that detail. So let me make a very blunt point. We have a consumer protection document for e-commerce, but I've now come across a seller protection document, right? So for example, there are smaller nuances in which a seller is listed on a platform. The first fundamental problem is whether I am a Levi's or I am a 10 lakh t-shirt seller sitting in Surat, I'm treated the same on the platform. That's how the platform is structured. But Indian SMEs and MSMEs have a lot of backlog, like what you said, credit issues, incapability to come with that professionalism on a platform. There are many such historic legacy problems which they have come through. Now, unless with that lens, we look at a policy for them where it's a win-win for everybody. If that clarity is there, I'm sure there'll be many people who will come and give credit. Without the clarity, I mean, you're giving credit to an unknown person who may or may not be able to survive the speed of the e-commerce demand.
What are your recommendations?
So my recommendation on this is the current tax point is only one among the 20 things. My recommendation is look at the life cycle. How is a commission charged to a seller by the platform? What are the costs which a seller is incurring today because of going to e-commerce? And then think what should be the tax on him. So today, let me just give you a point blank. 1,000 rupee MRP to the consumer, right? It's a t-shirt. The seller in Ludhiana is manufacturing at 200 rupees. The platform commission is 20%. 20% on 1,000, which is 200 rupees. Logistics cost, 120 rupees. So 320 rupees gone straight away. Cost of shooting that with the background requirement of the platform, X rupees. Now, that's the way it's adding up. Now, if that add up is not clear to the government, is it 1% or 5% or 2% or 0% has to be thought through on how the seller is actually getting charged for a transaction online, whether it be a t-shirt, whether it be a salon service, whether it be food delivery. And unfortunately, all these are different businesses. The commission structures are different, the tax structures are different, the logistics costs are different. So the platform approach
doesn't work
at all. Now, in reality, we are talking about this 1% strain on MSMEs. I believe the bigger strain is the business model itself. Because globally, e-commerce is not built to support MSMEs. It's built to support companies. Now, you're forcing MSMEs to come on the e-commerce platforms with the same policies and rules which is applicable to the larger firms.
And imagine with the neighborhood Kiryana shop or the small goods seller in your neighborhood market is now going online. So he or she will also have a virtual storefront list, and they have to pay 1% tax on
as well. Right?
So it really adds to their burden and makes their survival tougher, rather than easier. So we'll come back to you, and we'd like to get specific recommendations from all of you so that the government and people watching can factor that in. Aarti, let me bring you in. All the panelists on the show have been making a case for change in rules to support SMEs. Tell us, what are your specific recommendations? You're very well aware of the issues. Give us your recommendations.
Thanks, Anurag. See, we are going through very testing times. COVID, it has caused devastation across sectors, across economies. India is no different. The most impacted have been MSMEs. As my previous esteemed panelists said, that the e-commerce platform traditionally were not made for MSMEs. But having said that, in these times, these platforms were a boon to these MSMEs. It is because of only these platforms that during lockdowns they could make some revenue. And given the situation right now of COVID, Corona, we don't know for how long. It will definitely be there for next 1.5 years. So if MSME have to survive,
I hope you're wrong on that one. I hope you're wrong on that one.
I sincerely hope so too, Anurag. But the point is that MSMEs have to survive. They have to adopt technology. They have to come. They have to go online. There are several studies which say that in this year, departmental stores, brick and mortar stores will see 60% decline, whereas e-commerce will see 20% increase. So for MSMEs to survive, they have to, and that means we have to look at our regulations, we have to look at our policies, in particular with the lens from MSMEs. As many of my fellow panelists have said right now, we have one policy for all, but is that good enough? Should we have one policy for all, or should we look at different segments, different areas and have policies which encourage them? It shouldn't be one for all.
That agree. So give us one or two tweaks that needed to be made to this tax regime and the policy. What kind of regulation tweak it needs without upsetting the apple cart?
Yeah. See, for example, my humble opinion is the TDS 194O which they have levied. At least for MSMEs, we need to relook that. Does that really help the sector? What was the objective of putting them? The objective was, I mean, the various sellers on the e-commerce portal.
It will not even add up to a huge number.
Exactly.
There are other ways to match that tax revenue. If they grow, they'll automatically reach a number which will surpass. So, I think the government has, I'm sure the government will take note of this, because if we do not support the SMEs, then we are not serving the common man, the common person. Forget supporting the entrepreneurs, supporting the sellers, protecting their rights. And when, Ramesh was talking about it, I was thinking of doctors. I mean, luckily doctors today have an act that protects them. Earlier they were, if someone died in a surgery and, the doctor did his or her best, the doctor was at the mercy of the patient's family and safeguards were brought in. I was thinking of, similarly, when we talk of small and medium-sized internet-based companies, MSMEs that sell through the internet, I think they need to be protected too, and they need to be supported over the next 3 years, so that the vision of our Prime Minister for the economy to be bigger than what it is today, whether it's a 5 trillion or a 4 or a 3, bigger than, we had a 1.9 trillion economy, we shrunk by 24%, but I'm sure over the next 3-4 years, we will regain that back. And this has to be one of those, elements that have to go away. We have to provide impetus.
Business World presents Atmanirbhar Bharat Mission, and we are talking to entrepreneurs, SMEs and MSMEs specifically. Now, Anurag, you went ahead and left this discussion over a very serious point, over the rules and regulations that perhaps need to be amended. Is the proposal that has been put forth by everybody, the panelists that have presented their case over here during the discussion. And Lloyd, if I come to you and try to understand the lapses that the government has perhaps gone ahead and not been able to fill. There are gaps that continue to be there. We're talking about, obviously, everybody has been talking about the moratorium case. Everybody has been talking about the higher taxes. Everybody has also gone ahead and talked about when it comes to land issues, when it comes to lease issues, there needs to be a lot of leeway that needs to be showcased. But when it comes to e-commerce businesses, especially those which have been making a lot of business during the time of pandemic, there are issues that are of pointed concern, like you talked about the 1% cess. Are there any discussions that you have held as an industrial body and gone and put a proposal out in front of the government, in front of the finance ministry, and then perhaps go about bringing a rightful change on the ground, because this is how every single process starts, and then we see a change?
Megha, I think one aspect is disappointing at the speed at which this is being rolled out. We're talking about this tax coming into effect on the 1st of October,
Correct.
Which is barely 7 days from now. But I think fundamentally there are 2 points that are concerning. I think at one level, while India has been making definitive steps into this whole digital India, in the last 4 years, when I see the spread of e-commerce, the growth of a lot of sites thanks to e-commerce, I think this is in that sense a completely retro step. The second aspect is really what we call the omni-channel, saying that treat every seller as whether he sells it online or offline the same way. One of the kind of draconian measures within this law is the fact that every seller on an e-commerce platform needs to have a nominated customer grievance officer. Now you're talking of a small enterprise that's possibly making a monthly turnover of 5 lakhs selling on one of the e-commerce platforms. If he were to go out and create a customer grievance officer, that's completely beyond his means, right? And therefore, that principle of one size fits all. If the e-commerce platform is meant to cater to a certain large buyer, that's understandable. But when you're talking of a lot of the small and medium enterprises, I think the government needs to make it completely simple for them to do business. And like we said, that is the backbone of the economy. If we can get the MSME and the SME sector going, we're talking of adding jobs, we're talking of adding a lot of muscle to the economy. I think that point is something that the government is missing out. And this draconian, in a sense, 1% add-on tax is actually, taking the wind out of that sector, and that's very bad.
And Sridhar Prasad? your suggestions on this, especially with the fact that during the lockdown there were a lot of these measures and a lot of funding had been provided, and MSMEs and agriculture were these two sectors that were the focal points of the government. And then now, as Mr. Matthias has gone ahead and said that there has been a completely draconian, repressive step that has been taken, which is only going to be a difficult issue to circumvent by the e-commerce industry, which is perhaps almost the entire economy is right now on e-commerce.
Absolutely, I totally agree with what Lloyd said. And number one, timing, I agree. But number two, I think we need to have an outside-in support for the policy makers, and who else other than the top 5, 10 digital entrepreneurs of the country. I mean, we all are experts at level 2, but there are level 1 experts who are the Indian homegrown experts, right? They built this industry. So I think a committee kind of a thing to be created to define what is a digital SME or a digital MSME. And is WhatsApp commerce considered e-commerce? That level of detail, I think it's time the government need to go, because whatever it be, however optimistic we are, the way we are going to live is going to continue. So for the SMEs to survive is one word, but to grow, they need to be treated the right way. And who else other than the larger internet platforms in India to come and tell this is how we operate, and we believe these are the supports which SMEs need, and this is the way in which they should be taxed, this is the way in which credit should be provided to them. I think that clarity element, there are various inputs required, the people who work in the policy making, people like all of us on the platform, but most importantly, the entrepreneurs. The big entrepreneurs will know what they went through 10 years back. I mean, Flipkart's name was taken. There are many other names in India. What they went through ages back as platforms, and not only platforms, the consumer brands, the agriculture brands, I mean, the food brands, was grown up the ladder in the past 10 years. They will have a lot of learning on how taxation actually impacts them. Is it actually a working capital issue? And maybe there are many more ideas like what Ramesh said about ideas about.
And there is a cost of compliance also. Sridhar, there is a cost of compliance.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why when
small firm is itself huge. You mentioned, Ramesh mentioned, itself huge. They may not be able to sustain it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like what Lloyd mentioned, I mean, the consumer protection rule is forgetting how the seller operates. It's unfortunate, right? I mean, it's an ecosystem of all the 4 parties: platforms, funders, sellers, and consumers. We need to have guidance on all the 3. So just 2 quick suggestions. I mean, Anurag also asked earlier, 2 quick suggestions. One, I think we need a proper policy for sellers. Number 2, I'm going a little tangential, 30 seconds. I'm working with a foreign government in their homegrown platform for MSMEs. Somebody has thought about it in a world where they are not as digital as India. They have about more than 300 million population. India has 1.3 billion population. Think about that as well, because everything, and Amazon or Flipkart of the world may not be able to service. Our MSME pie is really, really large.
And Sridhar, just to give you a data point from e-commerce in the US, which is the leader in e-commerce, just before pandemic in March, in February, less than 16% of the population was using e-commerce. So if 100 was retail volume, 16 was e-commerce. Guess what is it in the last 6 months? And it took 15 odd years to get to 16. We are at 26 plus in this 6 months. So the e-commerce volumes are growing crazily. So they will grow. We have to support it. We can't, that 1% tax can be a negative input into the growth. Whereas if that is removed, the growth will offset for the small tax collection that it may get impacted with. That's my sense. That's why I'm saying 16% to 26% in 6 months, 0 to 16 in more than 15 years. So clearly, in some way, India will also see that trend. Go on, Megha. Sorry, I interrupted. Go on.
No, I think, Anurag, you're making a pertinent point, and so has Mr. Matthias and Sridhar. You've gone ahead and said that, yes, there needs to be a specific policy that needs to be gone ahead and chartered. And if Ramesh Kailasam could actually further reiterate that what are those, specific points that you, as an industrial body, if you go ahead and approach a government and a particular department of the government or the ministry of the government. So what are the grievances that you'll go ahead and take? First of all, obviously, you're going ahead and putting out this, or put an all stop to the TDS that has been put forth October 1st, come October 1st. But what else to go ahead and facilitate e-commerce, which has seen humongous numbers, especially during the lockdown, and it is only going to grow because this is the new way forward for every single business enterprise. This is economies of scale that e-commerce goes ahead and brings to any particular entity in any particular business.
Thanks. Yeah, so we have made quite an elaborate set of recommendations which we have sent to different ministries, including both finance, commerce, and the parent ministry for each of these sectors. Because while we talk e-commerce, these MSMEs and sellers are actually sitting in different vertical sectors, part of which are regulated, some of which are not, and some of which are governed by their own parent ministry. So we had to represent them not only to the two ministries, but we also have set our elaborate set of recommendations to these ministries. So coming on to the issues on which we have represented today, 194 I keep reiterating because I have a sword lying on all the startups and the MSME sector starting October 1st. But GST has been another major area which has literally taken out capital from this market. I'll give you a very simple example which we have represented across. If you look at textile startups today, you buy the raw material at 5%, you sell at 5%, but in between everything is 18%, whether it is logistics or services. But I can't draw back that money. It is my money sitting with the government. So more my business increases, I'm terrified because the working capital is sitting with the government. It is not government's revenue, but it is my money which can be set off, but I'm unable to set off. And there are many such examples. So we have actually listed out GST related issues as well. I come back to one more example in the travel sector when I was talking to SMEs and startups in the travel space. Today, if I have to sell you a hotel in Pondicherry and I must online portal in Delhi, I have to first have an office in Pondicherry with an address there and a GST number there. Okay. I have to file 111 returns per month if I have to open
it's a good number. 111 sounds Nelson. In Britain, it's called as Nelson. It's a good number.
Yeah, it's a good number, unfortunately. But if I have to give you an all India package of 37 states and UTs, so therefore I have to have 37 offices, 37 GST numbers, 37 TCS numbers. Imagine I was just using an online system where I was selling you airline and hotel tickets, which are all online, hotel rooms and so on. On GST, again, there are multiple other differential issues that we have, which we have given sector-wise to the government. So for us, TDS, GST are major issues which are blocking working capital in this sector and are affecting ease of doing business. The third area, again, as multiple panelists have represented, is this one-size-fits-all approach. This is not a segment to be looked at as a one-size-fits-all approach. There are multiple sectors which are regulated by regulators, which prohibit me from actually doing what you are telling me to do. Like Prasad was mentioning about the Consumer Protection Act, in which I am actually supposed to rate my sellers and tell who they are. I'm prohibited from doing so if I am under IRDA. I can't rate a payment gateway and say tomorrow.
You're saying so a policy bazaar, an insurance marketplace has to be treated very differently than a travel marketplace. A food marketplace has to be treated very differently. So you're saying a sectoral approach and is required, a specialized approach is required.
And more importantly, you can't be conflicting your own regulations, your own laws. Therefore, the parent ministry has to be taken along, which is why we have been representing to all of them. Our gross set of suggestions, therefore, are on both direct tax, indirect tax, wrong applicability of certain rules to your sector, which doesn't exist, conventional retrofitting of laws onto an online platform mode. All of that are part of the suggestions that we are giving. And therefore, we are hoping that
we hope we have 6 days to go. The government is able to take cognizance. Mr. Dhanendra Kumar, this government is a very progressive government. It is a very responsive government. It does take inputs from all stakeholders and incorporate. And, while it is also a bold government, it goes ahead and takes policy decisions and kind of lets them get implemented. What is the thought process you think from the government that has led to this seemingly not good idea of this 1% tax?
As I mentioned, Anurag-ji, this 1% tax came into being in February, effective 1st of October. In February, when it was envisaged, there was nobody knew about this coming pandemic. I am very hopeful that in the next few days, when it is going to be operational from 1st of October, it's a wishful thinking, but I'm sure that the government is going to review it. But since you asked a few more thoughts, if I could take a couple of more minutes and mention what I wanted to say in the beginning. As my colleagues on the panel pointed out, MSME sector is probably the backbone of Indian economy. It accounts for 30% of the GDP and almost 45% to 50% of the total exports. Also, in terms of employment, it is about 30 to 35% of employment, almost 15 crore people. And now when the government has passed these three agricultural bills, I'm sure in the agriculture sector it's going to play a very, very important role, the e-commerce in particular and the online trading and stuff like this. And it is extremely important that the government on both sides, I mean, for the supply side as also for the demand side, is aware of all this, and probably lots of things are going to happen in the times to come. The point I wanted to make basically are the following, just a few bullet points. First of all, I feel that MSME sector needs to be given a big push in India, and there's no gainsaying on that. And for that purpose, it is important that the ease of doing business metrics, which we are talking about for the country as a whole, and I have been in the World Bank and a great fighter for India's ranking, to be upgraded to improve in the World Bank's ease of doing business. Now that's for the overall ease of doing business for the country as a whole. For the MSME sector, you mentioned about the regulatory cholesterol, the burden, the cost of compliances and so on. I think we need to evolve a separate set of indices which would judge how much is the regulatory cholesterol which this sector and segment-wise has to face. And since most of the matters fall within the state's purview, probably it has to be devised state-wise and could even be segment-wise. So having said this, then there would be a number of other things which one could look at. The taxation is one part, but there are a number of issues. For example, there is this provision that you have to declare the country of origin. Very well thought of. We all know why it is, and we are all nationalists. But in these times, everything is not manufactured in one country. There are components, and in a cell phone, for example, there are so many components in automobile. Everything. You can't say this is manufactured here or there. How do you declare that this is manufactured there? So in a number of regulations, one has to take a pragmatic view. We are also talking about the startups, and Ramesh mentioned about it. We are very keen. Right now we have 31 unicorns. We want the number
these are called proficons, profitable unicorns.
Yes, we want the number to go up at least twice, if not more, in the next couple of years. There was a mention about e-commerce generally designed for the large companies. With due respect, I don't agree with it. If you look at what happened in China, the growth of Alibaba's and JD.coms and others, it was all based on small and medium enterprises. And for a country like India, it's just a channel of distribution, just a channel of marketing. When you have so many MSMEs in India, the channel of distribution has to, you are basically linking the demand and supply through e-commerce. It has to be designed accordingly. And I completely agree with Ramesh that it has to cover both goods and services. Services are equally important, and he gave a number of examples, the airlines, for example, and many others.
The travel services domain.
We have to design our e-commerce architecture suiting to the conditions of Indian economy, on the supply side and on the demand side. The goods and the services, and now agriculture is going to be one of the big segments which is going to be served.
Because there are one market, the Prime Minister's dream of farm to fork can be enabled through e-commerce, and hence we need to support that. Aarti, your final comment before I get a final comment on how Indian business and economy can be brought back, and where do our panelists see the economy going? Will it be back in full bloom in 6 months, 12 months, or 18 months? Aarti, your final comment on the issue of this 1% tax.
My one key recommendation, I have seen policy making very closely. For example, this law which was introduced by Ministry of Finance. I'm sure there were consultations with other ministries, but how much input, how much the impact on MSME was this understood, we are still not clear. What I strongly believe, policy making has to be evolving. It can't be just one policy and then that's there for next 10 years, 15 years. What now government is doing is they are making permanent working groups, to which Sridhar had recommended. We have permanent working groups comprising of various ministries which impact, industry stakeholders and ministries. For example, ministries like MSME, IT, finance, all of them which impact e-commerce and MSME. If they meet at least once a month, discuss what are the issues, discuss how is it that we can encourage the sector, encourage MSMEs in e-commerce, and then accordingly evolve policies, evolve laws, evolve rules, that would really be helpful.
Thank you so much, Aarti. Let me start with you this time. When do you see the Indian economy will be back in full bloom? 6 months, 12 months, and 18 months. What's your view and why?
I am pessimistic, Anurag. I would rather consider myself as realistic, but people, say it's pessimistic.
And what do you think the government can do to spur it? Quick one. Apart from what we've already
Agriculture and MSME.
Okay. Lloyd, when do you see the Indian business and economy coming back? 6 months, 12 months, or more than 18 months? And what can the government do to kind of make it happen?
I'll be more optimistic than Aarti, Anurag. I believe we should be, fairly back to where we were in about 8 to 9 months. I believe that by end of quarter one next year, hopefully we'll be on our way to solving the pandemic issue. So I think that is about 8 to 9 months would be pretty good. In terms of the one thing that the government can do, I think it's really in terms of the agricultural reforms have been very positive. In my mind, that might spur up the farm sector, which in India is about 60% of our GDP. So in a sense, there's already a great positive move. I think it's really about kind of loosening up a little bit of credit to get more money in people and businesses' hands that will really spur the economy.
Okay, Sridhar Prasad, when do you think the economy will be back in full bloom? And what can the government do?
I would agree with Lloyd. I think it's a 2-quarter story, hopefully. So by the first quarter of next financial year.
You qualified, hopefully. So tell us why you qualified.
See, the problem is there is no clarity on the unemployment situation. The spenders into the digital economy, a lot of people have lost jobs. When will they get jobs? We don't know. That is the only unknown in the story. See, whether the small virus goes away or not, most of the things are coming back to normalcy. I think I'm the only guy from Bangalore here, and I was on a traffic jam yesterday for 2 hours. So that shows something about the country today, right? People are thinking back, they're coming back to work. Other than the gig economy, people are coming back to work. So I think it's a matter of a couple of quarters where most business will come back. But having said that, to the second question of yours, what can be done? I think in the short term, a cluster-based consumption, some way a digitally enabled cluster-based consumption can be encouraged by government at the top or local self-governments, enabled by the technology capability India has. It's a short-term thing, it's a tactical thing, but I think we need it because cross-state logistics is a pain today. With COVID, you don't have people, migrant labor issues. So cluster-based consumption, I'm not using the jargon of hyper-local and all, but cluster-based consumption encouragement using digital can spur the economy for the short term.
Mr. Dhanendra Kumar, quick comment, final comment before I get Ramesh.
I feel, since you asked full bloom, I would take about 18 months, unless the demand comes to that level, which would depend on a number of factors, which would depend on employment, which would depend on various segments, the growth.
Government spending possibly. Government spends usually on infrastructure.
Spending and also the global indicators. In many ways, our economy is also linked to the global economy. So altogether, and also when the vaccine is likely to come, although there are a number of positive signs, and Bill Gates also mentioned about early next year, but one can say the middle of next year. So I would possibly say that by the end of 2021, things would possibly come to the level.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. Ramesh, your final word.
Yeah, I'll give an accountant's answer. Hopefully, I'm presuming that FY 21-22 start would be a positive sign. I'm going by numbers today. I was looking at the August 2020 collections for GST, which is roughly 87,000 crores. And the same time last year we had around 89,000 crores or so. So roughly there has been a gap in the last couple of months of 5 to 10,000 crores in the GST collections, which means that the economy is running with 1.5 legs. The remainder half leg, which are sectors which are yet to open up, have to open up. And that's when we'll see growth. We are trying to match up 2019 numbers and we are still falling short. So my hope is that hopefully in the next 6 to 7 months, we should start matching 2019 numbers. And after that, we should look for growth.
And what do you think the government can do apart from whatever it has done till now?
Yeah, my one-line recommendation is that I see a lot of good intent coming out of Parliament, a lot of reforms which are bold and forward-looking. If all translates well into the fine print of rule-making and guidelines that roll out, that is what can make a huge difference. And all our 194Os and others of the world are slightly contradicting that. So I'm hoping that the rules and guidelines are the ones which will give the ease and mirror the intent of the Parliament.
Thank you so much for being such an engaging conversation and taking real issues with real inputs. Back to you, Megha.
Oh, absolutely. Like every single day of the week, this has been a very insightful conversation. It is about the MSMEs and SMEs that are coming across as the backbone for the industry and the economy to thrive further digitally. That's the reason why that entire Atmanirbhar plan was put forth. There are some hiccups, but perhaps it is going to be the government at the end of the day that is going to listen to all the panelists who are sitting over here and many others who resonate with the opinions that have been made over here. On that note, I thank all my guests.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.